a woman that can do it all. She can work 8 hours a day just like a man. She can raise the children just like a wife. And she can satisfy her husband like a lover. So, yeah, we get to do all three of those things on a daily basis.
Okay.
Some of the stereotypes are blondes are dumb. Girls are only concerned about their physical appearance.
Women are too strong to have a man. So they have a label of not needing a man.
Okay.
They say black women are mean.
And if you're
Mean and
assertive, if you're assertive as a woman, then you're, and if you can't be assertive in the business world as a woman,
Right.
because then you get those labels that men wouldn't get if they're assertive or aggressive.
What other stereotypes come to mind?
One of the stereotypes would be that that women are not as smart as men, and we know better than that.
So I'm kind of lonesome.
And that we can't drive, we shouldn't be in the military,
Right.
and we can do just about any and everything.
Okay. I think we've covered quite a few.
Women shouldn't be in sports.
Yeah. Some people say that women aren't capable of competing exceptionally well in sporting activities. But we've seen that debunked a lot of times. What else?
I think roles have switched a lot now too. Women are considered to be independent and head of households, and a lot of times they have to do that. They have to be the head of the household and be independent. I'm not sure if that's a stereotype or not, but
It could
I
be.
hear a lot of young women saying that.
Definitely could be.
Or that single mothers cannot raise boys.
Yeah. People say that, don't they?
I mean, if you have to, you will.
Yeah.
It's not a first choice.
You can't get it back.
When I think about the stereotypes, Sojourner Truth, she's one of my favorites. She comes to mind. And people were treating white women in her day much better than they were treating black women in her day. And she stared some of them in the face and said, quite frankly, ain't I a woman? And she told them why she qualified very well to be treated as a woman. So when you get a chance, read up on Sojourner Truth. Okay, so let's move on. With that, let's see what our narrator for today has to say about Rebekah. Jim, would you start?
Growing up in the church, I was really curious about what type of a woman God would use. Maybe that's something you've asked yourself. And well-meaning women in the church were eager to show me verses like 1 Peter, where it says, God loves a gentle and quiet spirit. And I thought that meant a gentle and quiet mouth, which meant all of my eagerness to talk and share and ask questions maybe wasn't as welcome to God. And I have found such encouragement knowing that God never meant for women to stay perfectly silent. And when you look over the stories of the type of women God uses, there's so much variety, it just makes me smile. He isn't limited to use a certain type of woman with a certain list of characteristics that I have to force myself to fit. He loves using variety. And one of those women in the Old Testament that doesn't fit the stereotypical model of what is a feminine woman, who probably wouldn't even fit in well today in most of our women's Bible studies, is the woman Rebekah. And you can find her story in Genesis 24. The story opens when Abraham is getting much, much older, and he's realizing he has to find a wife for his only son with Sarah, Isaac. And so he brings his most trusted servant, the servant who was in charge of all his estate, to him. And he says, I'm going to send you to the land of my fathers, and I want you to find a wife for my son. So Abraham asks his servant to swear a very serious oath, saying he's going to find this woman for Isaac. And so the servant packs up 10 camels. He lays them heavy with gifts for this future wife's family, and he starts the long journey across hundreds of miles to get to the town where this family is supposed to live. And along the way, I'd imagine he's starting to plan, how am I going to find this woman? I don't know what she looks like. I don't know where her family lives. And so he comes up with a plan. He arrives at the town, and right outside the town there's a spring or a well. And he sees that the women of the town are coming with the jars on their shoulder to collect water for the evening. And he says to himself, I know what I'll do. He talks to God, he prays to the God of his master Abraham. Show me the woman that is supposed to be Isaac's wife this way. I'll ask the woman for a drink of water. And the woman who you want me to choose is going to offer to water all my 10 camels. And so he begins to start asking these women. And the Bible says, while he was still praying, the Rebekah comes out from the town with this jar on her shoulder. And Abraham's servant walks up to her and says, can I have a drink of water? And the Bible says Rebekah very quickly lowers this large jar, fills it with water, and says, yes, Lord, take a drink. And while he's still drinking, Rebekah says, while I'm at it, let me water your 10 camels as well. Now, I did a little bit of research because I thought, how much water would 10 camels drink? And I figured out 10 camels who have gone on a very long journey can drink anywhere between 260 to 400 gallons. Now, each camel's 26 to 40 gallons, but remember, there's 10 camels, so that's 260 to 400 gallons of water. And I figured, okay, let's say Rebekah's stronger than I am, and she's used to carrying water. For me, it's really hard to carry 2 gallons of water just to water my plants. Let's say Rebekah's pot carried 5 gallons. She would have had to make 62 trips to make sure all those camels were well watered. I estimate that took her at least 2 to 3 hours of her time. And the Bible says that she ran to water these camels of a complete stranger. Right off the top, we know Rebekah is quick on her feet. She's a quick decision maker, and she's strong. I mean, she's physically strong, and she's not embarrassed to use these abilities for somebody she doesn't know. The Bible says that the servant of Abraham watched her closely as she ran back and forth to water these camels, and that when she was done, before he even asked her who she was or what family she was from or what her name was, he gave her gifts. He pulled out these beautiful gold bracelets that were about as heavy as a man's watch today. And he gave her this gold ring, and it says he put it in her nose. And I thought, gold nose rings? I don't see a lot of women running around our churches with gold nose rings, which makes me think that if Rebekah were transported to today's culture, she probably wouldn't have fit in. That nose ring weighed about as much as my wedding band, and that's about this big, which maybe doesn't look so big to you, but if you put it up to someone's nose, that's a hefty nose ring. And Rebekah's wearing this as sort of a display of the favor she's earned in the eyes of Abraham's servant. Finally, Abraham's servant says, who are you? What's your name? What family are you from? And Rebekah shares, and that's when Abraham's servant realizes that God has answered his prayer. And he bows down and he worships. And Rebekah takes him home and introduces him to all her family, and they begin the negotiations. Abraham's servant talks about Isaac, he talks about Abraham, and they begin to discuss. And Rebekah's family says, that's fine with us. You can take Rebekah, but don't leave right away. This is such a big decision. Give us at least 10 days or so for Rebekah to get used to this idea, to say goodbye to her family, to pack up her belongings. And Abraham's servant says, no, I don't want to wait. I finally found this woman. Isaac's been waiting a long time. So has my master Abraham. I really want to leave right away. So at this point, Rebekah's family brings Rebekah in and says, it's up to you. Do you want to go now? Or do you want to wait a little bit and kind of say goodbye? And Rebekah says, I'm going to go right now. This is a fast-thinking woman. She's also bold. And I also think she's a little bit, well, a nice way to say it is adventurous, but she's also risky. She's taking a huge chance to go with a complete stranger, go across hundreds of miles and meet a man who's going to be her husband that she's never met. The Bible says that the only thing she takes with her is her nurse. And I want to take a moment and compare Rebekah and the decision she just made with someone else that we admire for his courage, and that's Abraham. God asked Abraham to leave his family, to go to a land he didn't know, but Abraham was allowed to bring his wife, his nephew Lot, all his servants, all his belongings. Rebekah only got to bring her nurse. And I see her as such a woman of courage, a woman generous in spirit, eager to give of herself. And she's a woman that I would like to be like. It's easy, I think, with Bible characters to just look at their strengths or the goodness that God has given them and think they had a life that was just so perfect. But Rebekah's life wasn't perfect. She gets across the desert, she arrives, she meets her future husband, and he does love her. We know she's beautiful. And we know that Isaac loves her and that he is comforted by her presence. But she then goes through 20 years where she can't have children. It takes her 20 years of barrenness before she finally conceives, and she has this feeling in her womb that something's wrong, and she goes to God and she asks him, what's wrong? And he says, you have 2 nations in your womb and they're wrestling. And being pregnant myself right now, 5 months along, and feeling the baby kick and move, I can just imagine in Rebekah's time where she didn't have a doctor to ask questions, she was wondering, what's going on? Am I going to die? Is something wrong with the baby? And she finds out that she's carrying Jacob and Esau. And she has these sons, and things seem to be going so well, but as the sons grow, Isaac prefers Esau. That's his favorite son, but Rebekah prefers Jacob, and they have their favorites, and you know how that creates rivalry. And down the road, you see Rebekah use her quick thinking to deceive her own husband and to steal the blessing from Esau, the oldest, and give it to Jacob, her favorite. The same strengths that we see God using to prepare her to be the wife of Isaac also end up wounding and hurting her family and herself. And yet God uses her. She is literally the mother of Jacob, who God changes his name to Israel. She's the mother of Israel. She's the mother of the Jewish people. And down the road, the mother of King David, and down the road even further, the mother of Jesus, the Messiah. So if Rebekah is a woman of courage, you know, her life, her decisions, they remind me of someone else. They remind me of Jesus. The courage that Rebekah has reminds me of the way Jesus had courage to do things that were servant-like and completely countercultural, like strip down to just a towel and wash his disciples' feet. Rebekah had that same kind of courage to not worry about what all her girlfriends would think, that she spends the next 2 hours carrying water for a stranger on his 10 smelly, spitty, large, thirsty camels. And I think about women who are courageous, and I've tried to distill, what is it that makes women courageous? What is the characteristic that I can try and emulate? And the thing that stands out to me is that women who are courageous are women who are comfortable in their own skin. They know their strengths. They know what they offer. They know what their bodies can give. They know their limitations. They know the strength of their soul. They're comfortable in who they are. And Rebekah gives me this example that I think we can apply today in the 21st century. We're, as females in America, not really good at owning and enjoying the gift of our bodies. We're not comfortable in our own skin. And when I talk with women, I love to ask them the question, not do you have a good relationship with your own body, but when did the bad relationship with your body begin? We all have a time, a place, and usually a couple people who started this bad relationship we have with our bodies. For me, I distinctly remember in 7th grade, one morning, I decided to take a huge risk and wear my hair, which is about down to the middle of my back, down. I didn't put it back tight like I normally did with a rubber band and bobby pins. I let it all come down, and I tried to get it in some sort of control with a bunch of gel and a lot of mousse. And I walked into my homeroom class feeling very warm. It kind of felt like this huge blanket on my head, and because it wasn't really styled or layered a way that was flattering, it really did look kind of like a large triangle. And I just walked into my classroom and quickly sat down in my seat, and I distinctly remember my neighbor, and I still remember his name, first and last, turning to his neighbor, which was a girl with perfectly straight blonde hair, and whispering loud enough for me to hear, "Look at Jonalyn, what a fro." I remember my heart just sinking. I just wanted to disappear. In that one statement, he had just decided that something about me was unflattering, coarse, unfeminine, unattractive, undesirable, and I wanted nothing better than just to pull all my hair back and get it out of the way. And that's exactly what I did for the next 8 years. I never wore my hair down. I was so embarrassed of it. I was so embarrassed to be different. And I wasn't comfortable in the body God gave me. It wasn't for almost a decade until I was dating this one guy. Every time we went on a date, by the end of the date, he would pull my rubber bands out and my bobby pins, and he'd fluff my hair out really, really big. And he would say, "Why don't you wear your hair down? It looks so good down." And at first I thought, well, that's sweet of him, but it's kind of hard to believe that. But he kept doing that. He really enjoyed my hair. It made me realize that something about my hair was beautiful to him. And, as females, we're really quick to ask other people what they think about our bodies. We go to fashion magazines, we watch shows, we read books. And I think it's hard for us to go to God directly and say, "Hey, what do you think about this body you made for me? What do you think about the things that make me stand out, that make me different?" Psalm 139 has a whole passage about what God thinks about the human body. And I've heard this passage quoted in churches to refer to the rights of the unborn, and that is all well and good. But what about the unborn who get born and then grow up to be women who don't value their own bodies? I think this verse still applies. So listen to the words of David, praising God. "I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and I know that full well."
Straightened it and dyed it so that it doesn't look like that. So, and it's not just white women; it's all women who. I have an Indian friend who has beautiful hair, but she doesn't like it. And I have another friend who's white who doesn't like her hair. Of course, black women have issues with their hair. So I think hair is a very big thing for women. Period. So for her to point that out, that's interesting. And body image.
Sure.
There's some women who are like I'm thin. I've always been thin, and I think I get teased just as much as a person who's really big. So it took me a long time to be happy to be thin, because I started seeing people who were teasing me get really big. So I was like, it's actually not such a bad thing to be this small. But in a black culture, it's always, "What's wrong with you? Are you sick? Are you okay?" And I'm like, I've always been skinny, okay? They used to call me olive oil and whole arm and all that stuff. So, I think, and then you just have to just one day strip down, look in the mirror and say, "This is who I am, and I like it. And the parts about me that I don't like, I'll work on changing so that I can be happy with me. Even if I wear a wig that's bright red, I like it. It's what I want to wear." So, I think all of that was awesome.
Any other reactions?
The lady they had in the real life segment was a person with low self-esteem, and Rebekah appears to didn't have a problem with her self-esteem or the courage that the way she went about life.
That's a good observation. She was almost the opposite of Rebekah. Other reactions to this video?
One of the things, of course I'm saying it in my own way, one of the things that was said was, you accept what God has for your soul, but you don't accept what He gives you, your body. Yeah. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I could look at myself and like, and pick and choose. I don't like this about me. I don't like this about me. But I'm excited for what God has for me, but what God has given me in the physical, I always question.
I think in that we are beautifully and wonderfully made, okay? And we are perfect. We are perfect. He made us perfect. I think a lot of times it's what we do to our bodies that we make our life. You know what I'm saying? Rather than eating the cookie, we want to eat 5. That type of thing. What I know for me myself, like when I was young, I had a full, beautiful head of hair. Well, thinning is hereditary in my family. So when I start getting thin at the top, then I start getting self-conscious, right? What did I do this weekend? I was like, okay, I'm gonna fix this. I just cut it all down to where you can't see it's thin. And I got on a hat today, but that's because it's been raining. But I feel better about me. When I'm don't have to be self-conscious about the thinning things. So.
Sure. I grew up in the 60s, and I was in college in the late 60s and early 70s, and as you know, afros were popular back then. Well, my hair is very thin and very fine, and I just couldn't wear a respectable afro. I used to wash my hair and roll it up in rollers so I could pick it out and have something that looked like an afro, because on the inside I identified with my African American heritage, but this hair just would not cooperate. And it kind of goes along with what you said and what she was saying about that image.
Well, isn't that amazing? I also grew up in the 60s and 70s. And I had almost the opposite of what you had.
Okay.
I had the hair for the afro, but this skin is like, it was just black. And I was the blackest black that was in the classroom. So I always wanted to be this colors, right? And I grew up with that because my parents moved us out in the suburbs, and I was the only black child in the classroom. And then to be of this shade, it was really a burden, and I really didn't appreciate. And still, sometimes I'm like, don't even take my picture. I'm not going to show up if you don't have a flash on. It's just not going to show. So why even bother? Don't laugh. So it has been a lifelong struggle. But then when I looked at my mom, who is my complexion or darker was, and then I said, you know what? God gave me this. And when I do walk into a room, especially in the corporate world, and I come in with this color, and they're like, their mouth open. Like, is that real? Yes, it is real. It is real. And so we have to learn to love ourselves, right? Yeah. And after my bout with cancer, and I had to take radiation, I refused to put perm back in my hair. I'm like, I'm going to wear it the way he put me here to wear it. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry. It's uncontrollable, but I don't care. I wish it looked like hers.
And I had the opposite. I was always, they were calling me white girl, and I would go home and say, what did I do? What did I, but had, gum stuck in my hair, cutting, just all kind of stuff. And it was, so, and I, the laying in the sun thing to get tan and dark. So, I mean, everybody, it's like is not satisfied with what they have. Everybody, if you have short hair, you want it curly. I don't know how many times I've straightened my hair. It makes no sense, because as soon as I perspire, this is what happens. So, let's just start out like that and save about 45 minutes every morning.
Right. There you go.
But as Christian, men and women, when we don't know God, the hope is different, because there are some people, even at an early age, when you know God, you're not concerned with your outer being as much as the people of the world. People of the world, they adhere to whatever the trend is going about. But when you got God in your life, you are more character driven. It's not what you do, it's how you do things. And that was the difference with the young lady in the real in the real thing. Just like when you know God, no matter what happens, you just have to trust Him. And for Rebekah, it's not sometimes knowing what you want. It's sometimes knowing what you don't want. She was ready. She might have been ready. Like, I needed to leave. So let me just go right now.
Didn't she?
As I was
I don't know where I'm going, but I know I
I
want
had
to.
hair and I had a shape. So God removed all of that. He made me as big as 300 pounds one time. And then I had to get sick and it was slowly coming off back to where it had been before. But my hair was so nappy, I couldn't comb it. I had to put rubber bands on it and get a straightening comb and constantly try to get it back down to where it was.
And I think
But
sometimes,
God
go
has
ahead.
been good to me. He's letting me see
Yes.
that a shape and hair don't make a
That's
person.
right.
Hallelujah.
All right.
And sometimes it's the environment, just like the woman said, when the guy told her to take her hair down, and then she started, see, God sent him there for that. I grew up in Augill Gardens, and we didn't have stuff like that. My mother is the color of you, and my father is the color of you. You know what I'm saying? And so we got all the shades, and it just never was an issue. Even, we were a family out there, and one wasn't prettier than the other and stuff like that. And so I didn't grow up with that. And then I had a father that, he just fed us with that self-esteem. So, I'm a big girl, but I'm a bad girl. Exactly. And so I do know people that's, they're down on themselves. I'm like, girl, look at you.
Yeah.
Check yourself.
And I like the way she put it. She said that she started to feel comfortable in her own skin. And I think that's a goal, at least that I have aspired to, and maybe some of you have as well. Let's move on. Let's go to page 30, question number 2. What are some of the similarities between Rebekah and her eventual father-in-law, Abraham? You remember the story of Abraham. What were some of the similarities between the two of them?
Well, just like Abraham, when the servant went to her and decided that she was the one and asked her to go, she did not hesitate. Just like when God told Abraham to get up and leave from where he was. And he did. He obeyed.
Okay.
And that's one of the similarities.
Any others you can think of? I think that obedience, acting without questioning God, moving on faith.
Yeah,
I just
having no idea what that
Right.
future is going to be, but just know that if He's leading you there.
Yeah.
I just thought of another one.
What?
And Abraham, he and Sarah didn't have any kids until she was well in her 70s. And with Rebekah, even though she found or met her prince, she still did not have kids until 20 years after. So they had to have that faith that God says, I'm going to give it to you. And they had to keep that faith for all those years. So that's what I thought that they were alike.
Any others? Any other thoughts? Oh, okay, then if not, let's move on to question 3. It says, read Genesis 25:19 through 34. I'm sure that you've read that before you came here. But the question is, consider some of your own strengths. How might an area of strength also have a shadow side and become dangerous if you're not careful? My strength is I'm an assertive woman. And in some situations that's intimidating to people. And so it's a strength, yet it can be deemed as something that's threatening to other people. For me, maybe.
For me,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, for me, I was a single mother. So I had to play the role of a man and a woman at times. And now that my kids are grown and gone, I just want to be a woman. I don't want to do all, you know what I mean? I don't want to change a flat. I want to call somebody and ask them to change one for me. And I sometimes I feel like I need permission to do that, and I shouldn't.
I think we get conditioned to be a certain way, and it's hard to get rid of some of that.
But it comes over like really aggressive. You know, I'll do it. Well, I've had to do it all the time, so that's why, you know. But now it's like, and then now the guys are waiting for me to do it now because they're like, "What? Is your arm broke? Oh, reach over there and get it."
Any others?
I agree with you.
There was one more thing. It says here, how might your area of strength also have a shadow side and become dangerous if you're not careful? Like Reverend Lori said, I'm assertive. And then that can turn into manipulating people to get what you want. Exactly what Rebekah did. Hey, I got this favorite one. I'm going to manipulate things to make sure it always comes out on top. And that's not always a good thing. Right? You
And
manipulate
then,
people.
What about all you assertive, confidence women and the way you allow other people to perceive you? Because sometimes, you know what, your assertiveness and your confidence can be perceived as being cocky or knowing it, or being a know-it-all, or either what am I looking for? Just being a brash.
Could be.
I think that was my issue for a long time because, you know, like I said, people were constantly putting me down. And then I got about 25, 26 and looked at myself one day and was like, you are and something happened. And for years I was like that, like talking to people any kind of way and, you know, mistreating people. And I had a guy for this and a guy for that and, you know, that kind of thing. And you get in sorority something, and guy says, okay, look, as he's changing you, you start to tear layers of all of the crap, and slowly that's what the devil was doing, you know, setting me up. But I didn't realize it at the time, and I just looked at myself from the inside out instead of from the outside in one day, and decided I didn't want to be like that anymore. And then he just, you know, he changes you. But he kept telling me, he kept showing me humility, and I wasn't getting it. Until one day, finally I got it.
Anyone else?
And we can be intimidating. I worked and I was in training, and every 6 months you had to write up a paper what you did, and then you went into an audience of people to question you. So it's me. I'm colored. And they were not. And the guy said, you know, after I went through it all, and he said, "Do you feel proud of yourself?" I said, "I've always been proud of myself." And he asked me, he said, "Well, we don't mean it like that." I said, "I've always been proud of myself." You know, I was about 20. And he told my supervisor, she said, she's kind of arrogant. Well, I was, you know, black power, you know.
Well, it's self-esteem. You're supposed to esteem yourself.
Right.
So you
they
did
had
that
a problem
well.
with that. But I'm proud. Well, how can I say you made me proud? I couldn't say it. Never did.
Okay.
Anyone else? Wow. On this question?
Yeah, that black power thing will get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's already a stereotype, like Greg said, that's set up, you know, for us women of color.
Yeah. I grew up in Lake County. For any of you who know anything about Lake County, there aren't a whole lot of us up there.
No, not at all.
And I found out early on that I was capable of competing with the best of them and even doing better than they did. So that was a strength on my part. The shadow side of that was sometimes you wanted to just stick it to them. Sometimes you wanted to just say, "Now there,
Yeah.
I got first place. Now there." But yeah, I had to resist that temptation. But yeah, in terms of the black power, black women can be powerful. Black women can be intelligent. Black women can be anything they want to be. And I would get offended when people would try to tell me otherwise. And I was kind of like you when I was coming up. Remember you talked about your weakness that you had your language. I was kind of like that, and that's the kind of language I would use to defend myself. And I don't do that anymore because as you said, God changes you from the inside out, and it's a very subtle, gradual kind of change. And before I knew it, I was a different kind of person. I hadn't lost anything, but I expressed it a little bit differently. Yeah.
And then too, if you think about it, like if we really go down into our roots, like I've had people question my eye color. I mean, all kinds of things. And my grandmother is mixed with black and white, and my mom has an older sister and a younger sister who look white or like Hispanic, and she was a dark complected one. So you have all of those things, but this is what I try to tell my children. It is not about who you are in ethnicity or nationality as much as it is about who you are in spirituality.
Oh, there you go.
That's what's important, because I do have white in my blood and I have black in my blood, and I even have a little Spanish in my blood. When people see me, of course, they identify me as black, and that's fine. Whatever they want to call me, that's cool. But I don't question anybody's nationality or ethnicity as much as I do their spirituality, because I've seen it in everybody on both sides as far as God and the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you come to me, even when you're smiling, I can discern who you are by what's on the inside. That to me is very powerful.
Yeah. Anyone else on this question? I think we have time for one more. These are such interesting questions. Trying to decide. Let's look at question 4. How is Rebekah's example of humble service similar to Jesus' willingness to wash his disciples' feet? And how do you see a Christ-like spirit in Rebekah?
She was selfless. She wasn't concerned of what people around her may have been thinking. She saw a need of a person. She wanted to give herself to that person, not only to that individual, but to the camels, everything that came with that person. She wasn't, like I said, she wasn't selfish or, self-centered. Like, I got to get home. This thing heavy. I'm tired. You're going to really stop me and ask me for anything? Like, she wasn't that person at all. And just like Jesus, he wasn't a selfish person. He was selfless, and he didn't think about what his actions, people may think of him because he was washing his disciples' feet. He didn't care. He had a reason why he was doing it, and he did it. And everybody else's concerns of what he was doing, it didn't matter. So,
yeah.
And the Bible talks to us all the time about being humble. But some of us as Christians, we don't know the difference in being humble and having humility in our lives.
Tell us what you perceive to be the difference between being humble and having humility.
Well, I think just like when you have humility, Rebekah, when she displayed humility. What she did, what had to be done when it had to be done, and now being humble is your attitude. Just like how she said she couldn't, she was not at the time, I don't think she was, she said she couldn't allow them, they asked her that question about being proud. Just like say when you're humble, you don't need anybody to tell you how good you are or are not. But when you display humility, all you are doing is what should be done anyway.
Okay. Anyone else on this?
I think also when you're humble, you deny yourself.
I agree.
She denied herself because when she added up all those gallons of water,
I'm sure she did the math first. Like, I'm going to be here for a while.
She may not. Right.
No,
Exactly.
I don't think
But
she
she
did.
did.
I don't think she did because she reminded me of me. Seriously, because I will just I'll see a need and I'll just go head in.
She knew it wasn't going to take
Until-
5 minutes. She
Yeah.
saw 10 camels. She wasn't blind, and she wasn't silly. She knew it was going to take amount of time that she would have to commit to.
But I don't even think she thought about it in that aspect, though. I think it's just that she, like you said, she saw a need and she was willing. She was just that type of person that would
Right.
just, jump in and do it until the job got done.
And not only that, she was an overachiever. And I think a lot of us, when we start to serve God's people, we want to go all out and give our best.
Yes,
And we want to have the mind of Christ. We want to interact with people as Christ interacted. And in that regard, she was a very good example. Any last thoughts about Rebekah before we close?
I think we have to give an account to what needs to be done. God will show you the easy way out or the best way.
And it may not
The
be
way
easy,
you go
yeah.
is the way you feel is best.
Any other thoughts, closing thoughts? Well, thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you for joining us. And that ends our class for this evening. Be blessed until we meet again.